Well, it most definitely appears to be that the roof at the house Mario built is leaking like crazy right now. In fact, leaking more and more severely than I think has ever happened in Nintendo's history. I have never seen anything like this before. I mean, it was not uncommon for us not to see a prototype controller, let alone the final controller for Nintendo Home Console, let alone a Nintendo Home Console itself, until, well, until usually the E3 press conference at which the new home console was announced, or if it's a handheld, the handheld was announced. And yet we have now had two separate leaks of a grand total. I think it is either two or is it three? I think it's three separate images of what is claimed to be either what is, well, no one knows for sure whether it's the Nintendo NX controller or Nintendo's or the Nintendo NX handheld. It's one or the other. No one quite knows yet whether it's a replacement for the Wii U or the 3DS, or maybe even both. I'm just going to quickly flick here through my web browser to have a look at these images in a zoomed up form. And these two images which you should be looking at now over the course of this video, they are a very, very dramatic step up over the previous ones. The previous images were of what may or may not be either the NX controller or an NX handheld, were directly from above looking down. These ones are taken at a angle. We cannot see the sides at all in the prior image of the controller. On this image we can see part of it. This controller appears to be all black and is also off, while the other controller appeared to be white and appeared to be on. It gives us a more clearer look of the controller, if it is a controller. I mean, I'll get to that in a moment. There are two analog sticks that appear to be kind of like the ones on the Wii U gamepad. In other words, they're technically analog sticks, but they don't really have a stick part to them. There appears to be no visible buttons. Again, it should be noted of interest that the images that have been leaked so far, and these two do look much more legit than the previous images, do not appear to show any physical buttons. You cannot see the top of the controller properly, so if there are analog triggers there or shoulder buttons of any description, they're not visible. We cannot see them if they're there or not there. Again, we don't know whether this is a final late development prototype, a dev kit controller, and it has to be a dev kit. This did not come from Nintendo first party in-house development. This is a third party leak, if it is a legit leak. But we do see those two analog controllers, analog sticks, and that leads me to believe that all the other button functionality is touch based, which, again, like I've said in my previous video, does give me quite a bit of room for concern. The one thing that should be noted right off the bat is that both images, which appear to be of the same device on the same table, admittedly taken at maybe different angles with different light, do appear to have headphones plugged into them in this image. They're definitely not some kind of controller cable of any kind. They definitely appear to be kind of conventional headphones you'd find plugged into a typical modern day smartphone, or even dare I say it, if you have one, a dedicated portable handheld gaming device. The images, I'd highly recommend you go find them out on the internet. They're much higher resolution than I can record at with the software I've got, so go out and find them yourself. The thing this leads, I mean, I could understand the logic behind equipping them. I'm not sure if the Wii U gamepad had an audio jack for headphones in it, but I could understand the logic for it, particularly if they were following a similar kind of line of thinking where they wanted to have the controller, via the controller, games on the home console playable when the TV was out of use. I think they might have had to have put a screen on the controller to provide backward compatibility with the Wii U. Well, they would have for a lot of Wii U games, although most Wii U games didn't really meaningfully use the Wii U gamepad's touch screen in any real meaningful way. But Nintendo being Nintendo, they tend to be pretty obsessed, not just with backward compatibility, but usually hardware-based backward compatibility for the previous generation of consoles. It's the reason why the Wii and the Wii U both use the PowerPC chip from the GameCube, which at this stage is an absolutely prehistoric piece of technology, and is one of the main reasons the Wii U had such terrible third-party support, is because the processor, no matter how hard you work at it, could never match the chip in the Xbox 360, let alone the PlayStation 3 cell processor for real-world performance. Again, this is getting a bit off topic, but just so you know. But this looks, it looks very, again, I assume this is a development kit. If you look at one of the images, there's both of them, but particularly one, you can see that there's a sticker, confidential property. It's in English. This again kind of reinforces the idea that it's a Western third party that's leaked this. There might be, it looks like, potentially a camera on it, and maybe another place we can, you can't see around the top of it. Is it, here's the thing, if you look at those two images, particularly the kind of the one where there's a laptop partially visible, partially visible, it looks thick. How now is it? You could say the Wii U gamepad was thick enough, and many modern day console controllers are thick, but to a degree, the thickness of them, particularly when the parts you hold in your hands, is down to ergonomics. Give them plenty for you to hold on to, ergonomically very comfortable, and so on. This controller, if it is a controller, and it is certainly from an overall shape and ergonomic standpoint representative of what the final kit will look like, doesn't really fit into any kind of pre-existing design ethos for a handheld, like a controller for a games console. Now, we can't see the back of it. There might be grooves and indents which make it easy to and comfortable to hold. Who knows? But right now, and I was looking at it as well, the screen is very oddly shaped. At the curves at the ends. This would say to me that that the screen is a very custom piece of hardware, which I think would probably add to the cost of the system. The Wii U's gamepad, like a lot of Nintendo tech, the screen is probably very off the shelf indeed. This does not look like that at all. It's also equally importantly, I think, it's also just, if you look at the images, Nintendo hardware tends to give off a kind of a toy company vibe, and that has been historically Nintendo's outlook on things. They viewed themselves as being a toy company effectively. This, again, it's still prototype hardware, but it doesn't give off that vibe at all. The other images, the previously leaked image did, because it was typical stereotypical white on the controller. This is much well, there's no white in it at all, and it feels much more like it. I think a previous description of it that had come out in a leak, was it a week or two ago, described the controller, or the NX, as being as if a Nintendo 2DS, that's the 3D-less cheap version of the 3DS, and a Samsung had quote unquote a baby. This very much kind of, I suppose you could say, it looks like that, in that it looks more smartphone-y, purely in the sense that, it doesn't look like, a Fisher-Price type cheapish toy, which is what Nintendo hardware, like the 3DS, like the DS before it, like the Wii and the Wii U, or the GameCube for that matter before that, that's the vibe they gave. This does not give off that vibe at all. The real question is, as I said, is this a controller? Or, again, the lack of, we can't see if there's any shoulder buttons, we can't see if there are triggers, although it doesn't, certainly your typical analog triggers, one would think, would require something a bit, taller than this. So I'm thinking, is this, are we not, if this is a pretty far along development, in development terms, Nintendo NX controller, it's probably one of if not the, as I said, single biggest leak that Nintendo's ever had. I can't remember off the top of my mind ever seeing images of an actual, even prototype controller before a Nintendo system was publicly announced. And if this turns out to be an actual handheld, well, that's even bigger again, with significant kind of implications there in terms of, again, this would be the biggest leak, they've ever had. As to, again, why it could be an actual standalone handheld device. It looks, again, it could be thick enough. I mean, people think, oh, surely, how more advanced the tech would be than compared to the 3DS. Surely you have to wait a couple more years, and the 3DS has been so successful. The 3DS was, in its original guise, barely a match for at the time, current generation iPod Touch when it came out, and was actually a bit more expensive. The PlayStation Vita, which falls somewhere between a PlayStation 2 and a PlayStation 3, and is actually apparently, in terms of capabilities, is closer to a PlayStation 3. I have one myself. I don't have a 3DS. I have a Vita, and I'm quite fond of it as a mobile indie game delivery system. The PlayStation Vita came out in Europe and America, if memory serves, in 2012, which makes it 4 years old. So if Nintendo is going the kind of balls to the wall route and building a new dedicated handheld gaming device to replace the 3DS, and if they're targeting a $249 price point, which is the same price point the 3DS launched at, it should be noted that with the 3DS, that was a ridiculous price point. Nintendo was able to cut the cost of the hardware down to about $160 in the first 12 months the system was on the market, because its sales dropped off a cliff without losing serious money on the hardware. In other words, they built a ginormous profit margin into the 3DS at launch, which meant if you were paying $249 for a 3DS, you weren't getting $249 worth of hardware. You were getting $160 of hardware plus a nice Nintendo profit margin on top. This, again, if this is a handheld, it does not come across as being an example of that. It doesn't have the Fisher-Price toy vibe that the previous handhelds or home consoles have had. Again, that screen is of a very specific shape. I have never seen a screen shaped exactly like that on a smartphone or any other kind of small compact device that would have a small compact screen like that, which says to me that's custom, and that is very un-Nintendo. They rarely, if ever, do that. They take off-the-shelf technology and kind of screw it all together, as it were, and then put their games on it, which unfortunately for them has been a formula that certainly didn't work with the GameCube, didn't work as well in the N64 as it did the SNES, and certainly did not work on the Wii U, and maybe they've abandoned it in totality for what we're looking at now. If it is a handheld, again, assuming a $249 price point, this would say to me that if it is a handheld, that they're going for, basically they're taking that $249 price point and they're spending all that money on the hardware, packaging and shipping. In other words, they're not building in a profit margin into the hardware at launch, because this thing does not give off that, yes, we've got this thing costs $50 less to make, package and ship than we're charging for it. This looks like, again, quote unquote $249. It could be more. If I were them, particularly considering what happened to the PS Vita, although Sony made so many own goals there, it's not even worth talking about. I don't think $299 would be too much. I think $249 would be the absolute maximum. I think the question is, if it is, it's an interesting situation with Nintendo. They tend to be historically a kind of a TikTok company. They replace the handheld or the home console, and then at a later date, after they've replaced one platform, they replace the other. The Game Boy Advance, I think it came out after the GameCube. I can't remember off the top of my head. If anyone knows, please let me know in the comments. But in the case of the GameCube, It was the Game Boy Advance that kept the company ticking over and profitable, because the GameCube was an abject disaster, although not as much of one as the Wii U has turned out to be. And it's the 3DS that has kept the company from being in less extreme circumstances than it would be otherwise. Although again, when the 3DS initially launched, the first 12 months were kind of a disaster until the Christmas after it launched, and they first had to finally add some decent first-party games. I can never quite understand why Nintendo launched the 3DS when they did. It was premature, to put it bluntly, both in terms of the hardware's design and in terms of the available first-party and third-party exclusives. There just weren't enough of them, and they weren't good enough at launch to keep driving sales. This leaves me, quite perplexed. I mean, it's if this is legit, this is very, very, very un-Nintendo-like behavior. It's very, aggressive for them to be building something. So this won't be. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a stylus hidden somewhere on this. But again, there's no way that they could use the screen as a replacement for physical buttons. Again, the digital pad, the A, B, Y, and X buttons. I think it's X, or is it C? I can't remember. I apologize. They can't use a single touch-only screen, which is what they've used previously on the gamepad and on the DS on this. So it has to be a multi-touch screen. It appears to be clearly custom. I mean, it is very, very unlike them to go this bespoke on their hardware, and they clearly have. They clearly have gone, bespoke, as it were, on the hardware. And again, Nintendo doesn't do this. I mean, yeah, they did design a custom chip so they could stream video to the Wii U gamepad, and with a low enough latency, and apparently that tech worked very well. But I've never heard of them going this far before. I mean, again, who knows? There could be absolute junk on the inside. But considering the fact that, as of recording this today on the 23rd of March, the PS Vita came out in Europe and America 2012, so 2 from 6 is 4 years old. And the system is 4 years old. A brand new system, assuming a $249 price point if it's a handheld, assuming that they intend to sell at cost or a small loss on the hardware, and that this is a handheld. The tech in this could represent a serious jump. I mean, we're definitely talking better than a 360 and a PlayStation 3. Which is in itself effectively better than a Wii U, because the Wii U's got so many faults in terms of the inside of the box, in terms of lots of RAM but too slow, ancient processor architecture. There are a couple other things that are bad about it as well. A ridiculously small amount of internal storage capacity. The list goes on. A seriously slow and sloppy operating system. I mean, I could just keep going and going. The other real question, however, as it just comes to mind, is a third possibility. And the third possibility is that rather than getting a dedicated handheld or a very sophisticated touch-sensitive controller for a new home console, that we are in effect getting two. That we're getting a home console and a new portable device at the same time, based on the same core operating system platform. Think of it as a Nintendo answer. Again, I've reported this in a previous video. On one of the earlier leaks, again, there was no images with this leaks reported on Nintendo calling the operating system Nintendo S. In other words, it was the word Nintendo with the S at the end, so you could call it Nintendo OS or Nintendo OS, however you want to pronounce it. And that they were planning on going for kind of an Android/iOS type situation, where the operating system didn't necessarily look like that, but it was the same universal operating system and the same API with the way you interface with the graphics hardware and the processor hardware on both their handheld and their home console device, for no other reason than to simplify their own first-party and second-party development, and probably make larger-scale third-party support of both easier and more cost-effective. Again, if that we can't verify the veracity of that rumor/leak, But I mean, if we're looking at a 2-in-1, where you pay a certain price, you get a box. Inside the box comes one of these controllers, and then another box you plug into the wall, and the controller has its own graphics chip, its own processor. And once you finish playing your game on the TV, you can take your controller, push it in your pocket, and go out and get on the train and either continue to play the game or play a different game on the controller. That's, that is interesting stuff. The real question, though, is again the cost implications. Because again, if this is a $249 portable gaming device, successor to the DS line of handheld gaming device that Nintendo has made, you take that cost into account. Even if they were to spend another $249, nothing more on the hardware on their home console, you're still talking combined price of 500 quid, which to my mind sounds more than a bit pricey, to put it mildly. Maybe it's a case of, I mean, this is the other thing, the really adventurous side of things is that they've actually, it's a kind of a hybrid, where when you've connected it to your box, you've got plugged into the wall socket, and it's working with and you're playing on the TV. The portable device and the box work together in concert to do the graphics, the artificial intelligence, the physics in the game you're playing on screen, and that would allow them to, keep the parts budget under control certainly for the home console. That's one thing they could do, and there's been talk about again other leaks of Nintendo working on hardware that would be able to work together in concert with other hardware to boost performance. But again, the problem there is what happens at the portable, what we're looking at right now. What happens if it breaks, or gets stolen, or gets lost? This is the thing that comes to my mind. It's all very, very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. It's also a bit interesting, again, as a side note, that whoever took these photographs appears to be the same controller on the same table. Did two things. They took no photograph of the other side, in other words, at the top of this controller / handheld, whichever it is, and both pictures include a visible headset plugged into it that you can see. It's very, very interesting indeed. The one thing is, again, I would say is a last note. Sony made a number of mistakes with the PlayStation Vita, particularly the ridiculously overpriced proprietary memory cards, but their other mistake was that the assumption that outside of Japan, Westerners, Americans, Europeans, would want that full big budget home console experience on the go. That's not why we bought the PlayStation Vita. It's not why we bought the DS or the Game Boy Advance. It was for different gaming experiences, different kind of games. Certainly wasn't my case, that you couldn't get on the home console. The PlayStation Portable was very successful, and the 3DS has been very successful in Japan, because the home console business there has been imploding for quite some time. So what we would consider here in the West to be kind of AAA games development, conventional games, RPGs, third-person shooting games, that sort of thing, action games, a huge sway to the third-party industry that supplies demand in Japan has basically switched primarily to handheld game development and to mobile development. And the home consoles have become in Japan something of an afterthought, and their share of the market has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. The original PSP was probably a massive success in Japan because there was that demand for conventional AAA games. No one bought the 360. The PlayStation 3 at launch, if you thought it was expensive in America, I think it was, taking into account taxes in Japan, they were going for around $800, so they were obscenely expensive. And the Wii U the original Wii did not get the kind of conventional game support that the kind of core gamers in Japan would have wanted and expected. So they went to the only available platform that the support was there and that they could afford, which is the PSP. And I think that might have been the main reason why it was so successful in Japan. It never had that level of success in America and Europe, and the fact that the PSP, there was a big performance gap in terms of success between the West and Japan, seems to have been ignored by Sony when they went to design the PS Vita, and one of the key reasons it kind of bombed in the West. I have the PS Vita Uncharted game. Quite frankly, it's naff. I bought it on sale for like 12 quid. Still wasn't worth it. The analog sticks in the PS Vita, they're all right, but they're too small, too compact. You can't control them with a fine enough degree in a game of precision in a game like that for it to work properly. The graphics clearly aren't as good because while it's near PlayStation 3 level capability, it isn't a PlayStation 3. If I want to play a big budget action game like that, I want to play it on my big widescreen TV and not play it in a small portable device. And the fact that they threw all of their first-party development capacity at Sony into making those kind of games, the PS Vita, which no one wants on handheld. They want handheld games, not home console games on handheld, where there are God knows how many compromises to get them technical and otherwise to get them to work. Certainly Western consumers have no interest in that, and hopefully Nintendo doesn't make that same mistake. And again, if they judging by the 3DS and the DSi, I think the DSi, maybe it's the 3DS, they'll stick with SD memory cards, widely available, cheap. That won't become an obstacle to buying the system. If it is again a handheld, again it could be. I know I'm getting on here now. I just don't know what exactly we're looking at. It definitely looks like legit gear. It definitely looks like quite far along in development, but not yet final hardware. Microsoft is not going to announce a portable this year. Sony is not going to do the same, I don't think. The PlayStation Vita has been something of a train wreck. They've sold 12 million units, I think, of the PS Vita, but the 3DS is on over 50. I don't know what to think. I mean, would Nintendo end the 3DS business right now when they're going for like... They've sold over 50 million units. I'm not so sure. But the 3DS is now going for an awful lot less money. Well, the new 3DS is more expensive. And again, that doesn't make much sense. They introduced that new version of the DS before last Christmas, some point last year. Well, then that's not unknown. They released the DSi, was it a year or two max before the 3DS came out? So maybe that's a case of that. But we'll have to wait and see. I would assume whether it's a home console or a portable or both, I would expect to guarantee as large a back catalogue of games as possible that this will be fully backward compatible with both the 3DS and the Wii U, although again with no 3D functionality on the screen, obviously, for cost reasons and also eye damage of children reasons. It's interesting, very, very interesting times we're living in right now. The fact that we've gotten so little specific information on the hardware, particularly now that we've got this, is also a bit like in terms of the rumor mill and leaks to the press. But maybe this will open the floodgates. Whoever did this leak was obviously confident enough that they wouldn't get caught, so they went out and did it. Very, very interesting indeed. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I really shouldn't. I've gone way too far. I apologize. This is going on for almost half an hour. I'm very, very sorry. This is Defub21. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I really do want to hear what you have to say on this. I think this is by far the biggest leak Nintendo's ever had. And if you like this video, please like it. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so. This is Defub21 signing off. Toodaloo.